there, friends, adventurers, and game masters. I'm the Dungeon Coach, creator of DC20, and I want to give you guys a quick overview class guide of all of the classes in DC20, because we have a very strong class fantasy that we've taken in a new direction. If you're used to Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, I think we've done a great job here of shaking up the class fantasy, of really making each one feel iconic and different and unique and exciting to play. This is designed to be an overview step back so you can really think about kind of what it would be like to play that class. I'm going to talk about general things and let you think of what sounds interesting and what would excite you to play. And I will be releasing more full guides like I've already done for the Psion that I'll link down in the description as well, for full class guides if you really want to dig deep. All right, first up for the marshals is of course going to be the fighter. The class fantasy here for the fighter is a master of weapons and armor and combat, getting their hands dirty in combat in lots of different ways. So to tackle the weapons and armor, you're going to be able to pick 2 fighting styles. Yes, that's right, 2 at level 1. You're going to be able to pick a certain type of fighting style, whether it be dual wielding, great weapons, swords and shields, single weapons, armors, be more defensive, be more tanky, however you want to express that, you're going to be able to pick 2. And then something just so iconic for a fighter is adaptive tactics. Fighters, the longer a fighter is on the battlefield, every round of combat, the fighter is soaking in, learning their enemies, watching their attack patterns. They start to get better and better as combat goes on. So the first round of combat, you're just soaking in the battlefield, but the second round of combat, you start to have advantage in all of your martial checks, and then you have advantage on attack checks, then you have advantage on your physical saves, then you have advantage on death saves, and as the combat goes on, you become more dangerous. Every class also has a flavor feature, which in general doesn't have anything to do with combat and just a little bit more of a outside of combat thing that all of these classes are going to get. For the fighter, it is know your enemy. And you're able to study an enemy and kind of be able to learn some unique things about it just by watching them. Then a little sneak peek for fighters at level 2, you can actually spend your stamina to gain more action points to be able to do more stuff, and a second wind to keep yourself pushing through battle. And before I forget, for the fighter, a key thing for all martial classes is how you regain stamina. Every single martial class gains stamina in a different and unique way. Fighters gain stamina by performing maneuvers, which is actually one of the easiest ways to get stamina, which is very iconic for the fighter. Moving on to the second class now, the Barbarian. How Barbarians get stamina is they hit hard or get hit hard. Whenever you deal a heavy hit or brutal hit, or you receive a heavy hit or brutal hit, you gain stamina. Then of course, in the spirit of our Barbarian, you have something called Savage Defense, which is unarmored, another option for you to be able to have more mobility and not wear armor. Then your 2 main features at level 1 are familiar in Rage and Reckless Attack. Reckless Attack, you gain advantage on attacks, but enemies have advantage on attacks against you. Very iconic Barbarian thing. But in DC20, the Rage mechanic works a little bit different. While raging, yes, you do take half damage, but your physical defense actually drops. You lower your defense score from being so offensive. You actually increase the chance that you're hit, which for Barbarians, that's actually good and plays into the playstyle of Barbarian. You want to get hit so that you can then hit back. That's the whole feel. But don't worry, you do still overall take less damage while raging, because you do half the damage that you take, and you deal an additional 1 damage while raging. And advantage on might saves and checks and all that kind of stuff. It's iconic. Now, the flavor feature for the Barbarian is you automatically crit inanimate objects, and you can just break through stuff, which is cool. And the level 2 sneak peek for the Barbarian is a new feature of a battle cry. A Barbarian lets out a blood-curdling battle cry, giving advantage to their allies around them in battle. Third class up is a new class of the Warlord. I call this a battle bard. If you take a fighter and a bard, combine them together, that's kind of the general of the battlefield type of feel that is the class fantasy of this thing is. And how they regain stamina for the Warlord is by taking the help action to help their allies. Their 2 main features at level 1 is Commander's Call, which you can spend action points and stamina points to be able to command an ally on the battlefield. You get them to move, you can get to an attack, you can get them to dodge. Off of their turn, you're able to command your allies. Super cool. And when a Warlord spends stamina, they are an inspiring presence on the battlefield, and they can actually heal. Whenever the Warlord spends stamina, they heal. Now, disclaimer here, Warlords don't heal magically in the same way that a fighter has second wind and they push themselves to the limit. A Warlord is saying things verbally, leading with actions, whatever they're doing to inspire their allies to keep pushing themselves forward. So this is not magical healing, but it is still healing nonetheless. Sneak peek into level 2 for the Warlord is you get your Warlord banner. This is a banner that you place into the ground. There's benefits and bonuses that you get to your allies that are within and around the banner, symbolizing your group, symbolizing the cause that you all have. And you also get a little bit of help to be able to help on initiative to be able to get people into battle. Really unique class. I love the flavor of it. I really do love where it fits in the big picture of everything. Next up is the Rogue, and the class fantasy here is a really big, separate, different direction that I really think is a great and much more iconic iconic for a rogue compared to some other things you might be used to. So how rogues work is they work and revolve around conditions, applying conditions and exposing weaknesses in their enemy, and then taking advantage of those conditions in the form of more damage. Also, while being skilled and sneaky along the way. So you regain stamina as a rogue by attacking a target with a condition on it. This condition could be grappled, it could be stunned, it could be hindered, it could be exposed, it could be whatever sort of thing is going on that has some sort of negative status condition. If you attack that target, you regain a stamina. As far as features go, you have a cunning action, which should become somewhat familiar with. In DC20, there's something called a minor action that you get one freebie to do a minor action every single round. You can minor action disengage, gives you a little bit more movement around the battlefield, a little bit more slippery. You also get expertise, which is a unique thing that lets you be able to actually increase that skill cap to be able to bump that up by one. But the two key features for Rogue is debilitating strike, which you spend a stamina to apply a condition as part of an attack onto a target. And then the second part of that, the other feature, is sinister strike, which gives you a bonus to damage based on how bad the condition is on the target. But if the target's blinded or incapacitated, you deal +3 damage to the target. And if the target is completely surprised or unconscious, absolute sneak attack surprise, that's +5 damage, which in the DC20 numbers, that's a lot of damage. So a feel of a rogue in DC20 is taking advantage of your enemies, whether you're comboing with your allies too, potentially, where they apply conditions and you take advantage of them. Really interesting stuff. Flavor feature for rogues, of course, is Thieves' Cant, being able to speak in that thief language. Level 2 sneak peek for the rogue is an unseen ambush type of ability where you can actually deal even more bonus damage to targets that didn't see it coming, and an evasion type of ability to be able to make you more evasive and dodgy. Moving on to the Ranger now. Big thing for the Ranger in DC20 is the Ranger is not a half caster. They're not a full caster. They're not a caster at all. They are a martial class. They are really good at what they do, and I think it's way cooler for a Ranger's class fantasy to be, they are so good at tracking, hunting, surviving, marking, watching, hunting their prey, and they are so good at that skill-wise, not magically so. Sure, there'll be subclasses for Rangers that dip into magical stuff, of course, but the core Ranger, it's a martial class. Now, what can they do? How they regain stamina is by doing hunter type Ranger stuff. Searching for things. If you ever find a creature that's hidden, you gain a stamina. Knowing and learning about creatures, making successful knowledge checks about creatures, whether it be mid-combat or you can regain stamina. If you hit your marked target, which brings us to the first actual ability, you have Hunter's Mark. There's an iconic thing for hunters. Yes, you can mark a target, you get advantage on attacking that target, you can track that target better, all those things with Hunter's Mark, and you can actually expose weaknesses on your Hunter's Marks. If you hit your Hunter's Mark target with a brutal hit, it actually opens up an exposed weakness and other allies can be able to deal damage to it better. And Hunter's Mark ties into the core of the Ranger because when you attack your Hunter's Mark, you also regain stamina as well. Also, another class feature for the Hunters is favored terrain, but this is not like the favored terrain that you might not like. This is not only benefits while within that terrain. That's not where it comes from. It is a list of different things that increase movement speed, increase jump distance, increase awareness, survival, other things that can apply to all aspects of your character that you learned from that terrain that you can apply to any terrain. So you basically get a benefit always, and you gain even more benefits if you are in that terrain. The flavor feature for Rangers is actually a hunting bestiary. You could role play this as an actual book, or it's all locked up in your head, but you have a very good knowledge of different types of creatures, and you learn and you build and you learn into it. Just like a wizard builds their arcane spell book and learns more spells, Rangers can learn more things about enemies and be able to track and hunt their prey better. Level 2 for the Ranger brings a lot of things online as far as natural hunter, gives you a lot of different bonuses in terrain, bonuses having to do with animals and interactions, a nice little booster kit for that, and it adds a new element called traps, hunter's equipment, where you can actually set up and build traps and imbue your weapons with certain sort of fire explosions or little traps you can trigger. It adds a little layer of traps, whether it be ranged traps or melee traps for your Ranger. Last up for the full martial classes is the Monk. I have done a video on the Monk to talk about the Monk in full detail, but basically monks, there's a lot of things that monks get to bring them up to beyond par with regular classes. I think that's a problem with monks in other editions of the game, is then monks don't have weapons, so then you have to give them something to bring them back up to normal. Monks have additional bonuses to their unarmed strikes to bring them back to the level of regular weapons, and they also, since they don't use weapons, instead they have stances where you can shift back and forth live dynamically in between from stance to stance. You learn more stances over time as well, and you can shift your stances and gain different passive and active benefits while shifting your stances. Some stances let you be able to attack back if you get attacked. Some have increased your defense. Some increase mobility. Some increase offensive, being surrounded by targets. Lots of different options. But I got ahead of myself. How do monks regain stamina? They are the only ones where any unspent action points, at the end of a turn, if you ever have any unspent action points, those automatically get converted into stamina points because all things are at balance with the monk. No inefficiency of energy. Also, as a monk, with you throwing out all these unarmed strikes, you're going to be able to throw out another punch without having the multiple check penalty apply. Usually, whenever you make more and more attack checks, you get the stacking disadvantage. Monks get a one-time freebie pass to be able to throw out another punch without that penalty. Monks also get something called patient defense, and while not wearing armor, you have certain benefits and bonuses to mental defense and physical defense and mobility and all that kind of stuff. Another thing with monks is they have an enlightened mental state. So your charisma or intelligence, make sure one of those two is high whenever you're going to be choosing this, because you're going to get bonuses to your physical and mental defense based on whichever is the higher of the two between charisma and intelligence. Level 2, something really cool comes online in the form of key points, and this is not what you're thinking as far as key points go. This is not the standard array here. Stamina points for a monk represents offensive movements that you're making. You're spending stamina points to do offensive things with your stamina. That's a core part of the game, yes. But at level 2, your key points is the opposite of that. It's reactive energy. It's offensive energy versus reactive energy. Yin and yang of the monk, right? So reactive energy is things like dodging things, being able to be more evasive, slow fall, deflecting missiles, anything that's coming at you, redirecting it away. Now for the first and only hybrid class, which is a martial and a spellcaster in one of the Paladin. This is basically fighter meets cleric here right in the middle, and I was about to say holy warrior, but you as a Paladin get to choose unholy or holy whenever you choose Paladin. Is your cause righteous or not? Who knows? As a hybrid class, Paladins get a martial feature and a spellcasting feature. For the martial feature, you regain stamina by healing other people, receiving healing from other people, interesting, refueling you, or using your Divine Smite feature. And speaking of Divine Smite, you can boost and enhance magical energy, whether it be holy or unholy, depending on which type of Paladin you are. You can imbue your weapon with that extra damage with your swings. And Paladins at level 1 have an aura. And if you're familiar with Lay on Hands and all that kind of stuff, basically in DC20, Lay on Hands has been refitted, repackaged to be an aura. And you get it at level 1, and your aura keeps expanding through Paladins subclasses, through your actual class, and it keeps expanding and growing. You're able to heal people within your aura and cure people within your aura within one space of you. You also get a divine sense, as you're used to, being able to sense fiends and celestials. Then at level 2, you get a little bit more protection against curses and diseases, and you get a sacred weapon to imbue your weapon permanently with whatever energy you got going. The Paladin fantasy is to imbue your weapon with energies to smite down those who stand against you and be able to bolster and boost and heal the allies within your aura. Now for the full spellcasters, we're starting off with Cleric right off the back of Paladin. When you choose Cleric, you also get to choose a holy or unholy cleric. Clerics have a relationship with their god that they serve, and if their god is good or evil, that matters. So depending on if you choose holy or unholy, you're going to be able to shift your damage type of your divine spells to holy or unholy, depending on what the thing is. So Guiding Bolt, if you're an unholy cleric, would be unholy damage. Additionally, you also get to pick one free cantrip depending on what kind of cleric that you want to be, and you also get to pick a cleric order. This is a really big thing at first level to choose, and you can choose Protector, which gives you actual heavy armor. So clerics, if you choose Protector of your cleric order, you could actually wear heavy armor, heavy weapons, and really be that kind of cleric. Or you could be more of a priest type cleric and choose the priest cleric order, which gives you more healing bonuses. And there's also a third option of a scribe, which is more intellectual knowledge based cleric. Then the signature, and all spellcasters have different ways that they cast spells, and every single spellcaster casts spells in wildly unique ways. And for the cleric, it's their divine prayer. You basically get a list of prayers that you can reach out to your god to be able to give you a boon of some kind. And this boon is a free form boon that you can attach to spells that you cast. So how it works, for example, is the prayer of restoration. You spend 1 mana point, reach out to your god to pray for this boon of restoration. Once you have this, think of it like a little magic coupon that you can add an effect to any spell that you cast. So the boon for prayer of restoration is a +3 heal onto the target of your next spell. So if you cast a heal spell and use the boon on that, they heal for even more. But if you cast something like Bless, which Bless as a spell has no healing properties to it, it just gives, the Bless spell. If you wanted to use your boon because you've already prayed for it, a turn before, a time before, whatever, you can add a heal to one of those targets that you just blessed. It gives a really unique layer of customization to be able to pray for these certain boons to be able to have to then add and attach onto spells in unique ways. Level 2 sneak peek here is Lesser Divine Intervention. Yeah, I wanted to introduce Divine Intervention earlier on, and it'll increase and grow in capabilities, but as a recharge refresh from your god. It gives you a boost of healing to yourself and allies around you, and it gives you a little bit of boost of mana too. This feature is called Channel Divinity, and you can choose to do a divine intervention from that, but you could also choose to censure undead. And depending on which type of cleric you are, holy or unholy, you can change and manipulate undead in certain ways. You can frighten the undead if you're a holy cleric, or you can stun them if you're an unholy cleric. And those features also expand and grow into other cool ways of controlling undead or destroying undead. Cleric's cool. Next up is the wizard, and man oh man is the wizard just so iconic. What's the class fantasy wizard? Where do we go with this? I wanted to make sure to do the wizard right, and I think we really nailed the wizard. The wizard has two really cool features that I think are very wizardy. One of them is mana limit break. Wizards are so good at knowing and learning. They've studied how magic works. They can push the limit of mana once per combat. How it works in DC20 is you have a spend limit. There's a mana spend limit. You can only spend a certain amount of mana based on your level. You can spend an amount of mana on a spell equal to half your level. So at level 1, you can only cast a spell with 1 mana, right? At level 10, you can cast a spell for 5 mana. You get the idea. But wizards have a limit break feature of once per combat, you can increase that cap by 1. Wizards allowing themselves to push the limits of magic itself as far as they can. And it's a really interesting thing that wizards can get, and really seeing some cool stuff done with that. And then the second thing, and maybe the most iconic thing for the wizard, is arcane sigils. Wizards can place sigils on the ground at their feet to boost certain schools or types of magic. You can declare evocation, enchantment, ice, whatever you want to do. You can have a certain category of sigil that you create, and you put it on the ground. And while standing in that sigil, you have advantage on all spell checks made within that declared type of magic. This can also be comboed with your other allies as well. You could put a restoration sigil on the ground and have the cleric stand in it and heal their party members. Enemies could come up and stand in the sigil and use it. The wizard can place really cool sigils on the ground to enhance magic of themselves or allies. Your flavor feature for the wizard is of course your spell tome, where you can learn and increase and know more and more spells over time as you kind of find out and learn them. And at level 2, you get arcane points, which actually tie into really unique things having to do with their subclasses of wizards, but you basically get a little pool of points to be able to spend and use your mana in more creative ways. You can boost your sigils with these points, and then at level 3, every class in DC20 at level 3 gets their subclass. And for wizards, those subclasses are going to be the schools of magic. And you can use those arcane points to cast schools of magic essentially for free, and that the pool of arcane points almost becomes bonus mana specific to a certain school of magic. So divination wizards will be able to cast more divination magic for free using those points. Now sorcerers, I don't know if this one's my favorite one, but sorcerers are just so wild, man. And speaking of wild, they have a spell break feature. With sorcerers, I wanted them to feel electric. I wanted them to feel tied to magic in the most raw way possible. They have magic in them. They didn't study it. They didn't get whatever. You get the idea. Sorcerers have a spell break feature where you can choose to use this or not. This is something that's in your wheelhouse to choose, but you can choose to cast a spell for no mana. Now there are detriments that come with this, and as does the playstyle of the sorcerer. You introduce something called spell fatigue. If you cast a spell with no mana, it's gonna wear you down. So you can't use this too much, and you probably should only use this feature once you don't have any mana in the first place. But since you are magic, you have magic inside of you, you can still tap into it. And it does trigger some wild magic surges. So yes, wild magic is at the core foundation of a sorcerer if you choose to tap into it or not. And there's a D20 list specifically for sorcerers about how that wild magic works. But they're the only ones that can cast spells technically with no mana, which is wild. Which also brings me to the overload mechanic to the sorcerer, which is maybe my favorite, is sorcerers can overload their magic. If you've seen the class fantasy of the sorcerer, it is pushing magic beyond its normal limits. That's the class fantasy that I'm trying to issue here for a sorcerer. In overload, you can take yourself and push yourself to the limit. You are frying yourself to the max to try and cast magic at a higher rate. You add +5 to all of your spell checks, which is a lot, but you take potential damage, true damage, every single round that ramps up and up and up as you continue to be overloaded. I have seen sick versions of fire sorcerers burning themselves on fire as they're shooting wildly powerful powerful magics out as they burn themselves alive. And I've also seen Divine Soul type sorcerer healers, who also is another interesting thing with a sorcerer. Sorcerer's the only class, they get to choose their spell list at the beginning. They can choose Divine, Primal, or Arcane for the spell list. So you could create a Divine, at level 1, you could get a Divine spell list sorcerer, and I have seen a holy sorcerer overloading their magics with frying their neurons to heal their allies. Super epic and sick, and the sneak peek for level 2 is something you're going to feel more at home and familiar with. Sorcery points and meta magics to be able to have more points to manipulate and change and sculpt magic, and the meta magics to be able to kind of, like I just said, sculpt and change those spells. And then we have the Psion, which is a new class here in DC20. I do have a full video on the Psion that I'll make sure to link down below. But Psions have two big pillars I want to paint the big picture of. It is mentally attacking another person's mind and getting into someone's mind telepathically, and using your mind to assault someone else's body would be throwing them around like with telekinesis. The unique thing here with Psions is they do have a very, very limited spell list. You're not going to be playing a Psion like a normal caster in the way that you have this big spell list and you have all these different spells to choose from. The Psion is a lot more feature dependent in what they're kind of given and what they can do. So their kit is really based around Mind Blast and Telekinetic Shove. Mind Blast is a very powerful feature that lets you be able to deal more and more damage and assault a mind psychically and add extra effects like the Daze condition, break focus, you make people lose concentration, reduce their mental defense. And you also have Telekinetic Shove, which is like a ranged shove ability to kind of move people around and affect physical effects on them. You can also speak telepathically with others around you as your flavor feature, very obviously on point for Psions. And a level 2 sneak peek is be able to mind sense out creatures without seeing them. So if you're in the middle of a abandoned warehouse, you can reach out with your mind and sense to see if there's creatures around you. And once you attach on and latch onto these creatures, you can actually do some other things and expand and get into their heads. There's the big picture on all the classes. And if you want to take it one step farther and start talking about multi-classing, in DC20, one of the big things that gets me the most excited about the class system is how multi-classing works. At level 2, every single class at level 2 gets one talent, and you can spend this talent on whatever you want. At level 2, you could spend the talent on level 2 talent features for your own class, and like if there's going to be some other, these are also going to be released with the alpha and everything. But every class at level 2 can spend that talent on general talents, on their own class talents. But how multi-classing works is that level 2 talent you can spend on a multi-classing talent, which allows you to go get any other level 1 class feature from anything I just listed. So if you really wanted to build a Barbarian and you're a level 2 Barbarian now, but that one thing about the fighter, I really did like that one thing, you can spend that level 2 multi-classing talent, and instead of getting a level 2 Barbarian feature, you can go steal a level 1 fighter feature. Or if you want to dabble in the magic and you want to be a Barbarian that can overload themselves and do Barbarian Sorcerer, yeah, take that level 2 multi-classing talent and go get a level 1 sorcery overload. Because how multi-classing works in DC20, you don't get the entire level 1 kit of the entire thing at level 1, you just get a cherry pick and get one little feature, which just really opens up and possibly blows my mind about all the different possible combinations that I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. I hope that's a cool little overview here of all the different classes. There's going to be more released soon. The next classes coming out are going to be Bard, Druid, the Cursed class, and the Warlock class. And I have just now also added Artificer to that list to try and get the Artificer out there. The most requested class of the ones that aren't currently available right now is Artificer. I hear you guys. I love the feedback, and I've loved the hype and energy that y'all have been putting into this DC20 stuff. Can't wait to make more videos on this. Thank you guys so much. If you're interested in picking this up for yourself, link's always going to be down in the description to get the alpha and all the future updates for the alpha as we move on towards the full release of the game. I'll be keeping y'all up to date on all that kind of stuff coming out really soon. Thank you guys so much. This is so much fun. Stay creative. Think outside the box.